The Apollo Theater is one of those places that can seem inevitable in retrospect. The marquee, the name, the sense that this stage was always meant to stand for Harlem, but it was not inevitable. The Apollo had to be remade before it could become iconic. It had to survive a social barrier, a business collapse, a neighborhood downturn, and the kind of neglect that turns famous buildings into memories. The version people celebrate now is not the original condition of the place. It is the result of pressure, reinvention, and rescue. At 253 West 125th Street, the building opened in 1914. It was designed by George Keister and began life not as the Apollo of American memory, but as Hertig and Siemens' new burlesque theater. The structure that now reads as a cultural monument originally served a very different entertainment economy and a very different audience. In its early years, it catered largely to white patrons. That first fact matters more than it may seem, because the Apollo story is not simply that talent appeared there and history followed. The harder truth is that the building had to cross a racial threshold before it could become the institution people now think they have always known. The shell was there. The legend was not. Harlem itself was changing. By the 1930s, 125th Street had become a major entertainment corridor, and the neighborhood had already become central to black cultural life. But the building that would later symbolize that life had not yet become fully part of it. Then burlesque ran into political and moral opposition. The theater closed in 1933, and in 1934 it reopened under new ownership as the 125th Street Apollo Theater, with programming centered on black performers and black audiences. That is the decisive rollback in this story. The building did not survive by resisting change. It survived by changing who it was for. Once that shift happened, the Apollo became something far larger than a venue. It became an engine. Since 1934, the theater has been tied to the rise and circulation of jazz, swing, bebop, rhythm and blues, gospel, blues, soul, and later forms of black popular music. Its amateur night, introduced in 1934, became one of the building's defining institutions. Ella Fitzgerald's Amateur Night Victory is one of the clearest early examples of the Apollo functioning as a gate between local aspiration and national visibility. This is where the Apollo stopped being just a building and became a civic symbol. Not because famous people stood on the stage. Rather, because the stage itself became a proving ground. The middle decades made the theater legendary, but they did not make it invulnerable. Like many urban institutions tied to one district and one live performance economy, the Apollo was exposed to the pressures that hit Harlem in the post-war decades. Tastes changed, media changed, local economics changed. By 1976, the theater had closed. That closure matters, because cultural importance does not automatically protect a place from failure. Then came the survival phase. In 1981, Percy Sutton's Inner City Broadcasting Corporation and investors purchased the Apollo. In 1983, the theater received landmark recognition and National Register listing. By 1985, a major renovation was marked by a grand reopening, and Amateur Night returned. This was not just restoration. It was a public argument that the Apollo was worth saving as a living institution. Some places survive by becoming museums of themselves. The Apollo survived by trying to remain active. So what did it have to survive to become what it is now? It had to survive being built for the wrong civic identity. It had to survive the collapse of the burlesque model. It had to survive economic decline. And it had to survive the danger of becoming too symbolic to maintain, but too important to let disappear. Today, the Apollo can look like a settled fact of New York. But that is the illusion. The marquee feels permanent. The legend feels permanent. The place does not. What survives at the Apollo is the result of repeated decisions to keep the building alive by changing what it could mean and who it could serve. The Apollo did not just produce history, It had to survive long enough to hold it.
Subscribe for the next dossier.